Okay, thank you very much, everyone. So we've adjourned the formal council committee part of today's meeting, but the recording will continue and we'll be taking notes, which will then feed back at 12 o'clock as part of the formal minute of the meeting. And it's an open forum, so please raise your hand and let me know if you'd like to come in and contribute. Okay, I have Councillor Bremner first, and if we could just note that Councillor Bremner is present today, and I know he missed a roll call. Councillor Bremner? Councillor Bremner often misses a roll call. Councillor Bremner's got an absolutely packed diary today. There's not 1 minute for a break. So what I'm wanting to do, just very briefly, because I will need to leave you guys and girls, is just to note my absolute excitement about this. I've been involved in conversations with colleagues of mine, in particular Nicola and Carl, and I think that other Caithness members would like to take our hats off to them as well for driving this forward on behalf of the Caithness members. Also, the fact that this is a unique opportunity, but it's not just unique in the way that we're managing to come together to pilot it. It's unique because it will it has the potential to set a really good set up a really good model where others might benefit from what we are going to do, and we shouldn't underestimate that. There is a huge amount of positivity here, and there's a huge amount of positivity in terms of the relationships of all the working partners here, and sometimes you don't get that at a kickoff. But here we've got an immediate buy-in from all parties. I can't imagine that there's one party sitting at the table here just now that does not feel included, or feels that they're not included to the fullness of their participation. They will be fully integrated in this. I also think that in the contributions that I heard earlier on, yes, they are powerful, but you know what? It's a powerful subject. It's a challenge, and it's a huge task, and it's one that we've not been able to tackle as effectively as we've got the opportunity before us just now, and we know that. I think that many areas have been longing for this opportunity, and I'll take a back seat now and listen to how things go before I have to leave you around about 11:25. But I was wanting to be one of the first to endorse this whole process, and quite keen to follow up with all the actions and all the discussion points. I don't think we can hold back. I think we've got to be quite blunt about how we see things moving forward and the challenges that we face, because it's not just what we face discussing at a table. There are people hurting in our community because of the challenge that they're facing, and waking up every morning and wondering what's going to be their lot by the end of that day. That's not a good place for them to be there. And if we've got the ability to be able to in any way make that an easier burden for them to bear, and a lesser burden for them to bear, then we've done the right thing here. Thanks very much for that, Raymond. I now have Matthew, then Deirdre, then Donny. Matthew.
Yeah, thanks, Nicola. I've kind of endorsed what Raymond's just said as well. I'll try and be brief as well, but there's just so much you could say, and you can be misunderstood, and it's not always, we don't all have all the answers, but a few points I've just written down. Donna mentioned at the very beginning honesty, and Raymond mentioned bluntness, and so those are both really important. So from my point of view, my view is, having first come to Caithness in 1985, starting my police service in Wick, where I also finished it, this problem has been developing, brewing, literally over decades. It's gone on for a long time. I'm absolutely delighted that we're now here today. I also think I would like to mention Inspector Goskirk, if my memory serves him right. I think it was January of this year, Chair, that he first came to a meeting with us as members and sort of voiced his concerns after his short time here at what he perceived was going on. Very important, I think, to stress the role of the third sector here. Lots of organisations, PPP, youth clubs, churches, all the community groups, of which we have a huge and remarkable number. Going to the report, the main objective of the Scottish Government money is, quote, the delivery of community-based services. That's the actual words, and that, to my mind, definitely includes Police Scotland. As Conrad said very diplomatically, police officers don't just lock up criminals. They're also variously, informally, in my opinion, social workers, mental health nurses, comforters. They're a sympathetic listening ear at 4 in the morning when there's nobody else around. And in some instances, I go as far to say that police officers, believe it or not, despite the forbidding uniform, they're almost befrienders. There are people in the community who are at the bottom who actually sometimes know police officers better than anybody else. I think the personal touch is very important. And one quick anecdote, the police, through no fault of their own, have lost a bit of the personal touch in the community. You only need to go back a few years and our 2 main police stations were both open to the public, lights on, 24/7. And that has changed drastically from 8 members of staff manning those 2 police counters to 3. This is not a criticism, it's just a fact. We've been asked to be honest. Homeless people, not regularly, but sometimes literally slept on the floors in the foyers of the police stations because there was nowhere else that they could go. Some in the south frowned on this practice. I speak from personal experience of having had my knuckles rapped informally for allowing someone to sleep on the floor on a freezing cold morning. We dragged a mattress out from the cells and let him sleep in the foyer. But in my opinion, policing's not just the enforcement that Conrad mentioned, but also much, much more. I think for the police to be truly effective in the county in 2021, a key part of this is that the mental health services must be available and available promptly, not basically in just working hours. And that's a bit of a generalization, I know. I don't think it always needs to be the most highly qualified health professionals, but just as I was mentioning earlier, someone to talk to, as Nikki Grant said, a listening ear. A few practical points to get near what I'm finishing off with saying, and again, these are not really criticisms. I think they're facts, and if they're wrong, I'll be the first to withdraw them. If adult psychiatric services in the county are only done online at present, it would be good to do something about that. Police stations, as we all know, are not supposed to be places of safety. Police officers are not mental health experts, and police vehicles are not the ideal way to occasionally have to take mentally ill people over 100 miles to New Craigs. As I said at the beginning, and I have nearly finished, Chair, this I think has been a long-term problem, but it has recently become much more serious, and I hope we can now finally start to reverse some of the damage. And we've mentioned hope a lot, so I always like to finish with hope and optimism. And these, I think, are facts as well. I believe it's a small number of people who are causing a heck of a lot of the crime and disorder in the community. And you know what? Broken windows is not just a crime of vandalism, but it has a mental health effect on people very subtly over time. If their community is run down, if trees have been planted and then snapped off, or litter's lying around, or there's graffiti, that has a depressing effect on everybody, as well as usually being criminal as well. So I think there's a small number of people causing a lot of problems. I can't remember who it was, but someone talked about Caithness having tenacity and tenaciousness a little bit earlier, and community spirit. I think it might have been Nikki again. I really, really like that because it's true, and it's one of the things that drew me to come and settle here. It is a tenacious community, and people are prepared to go a long way to help people. I think, and I'm not an expert, there are people around here, around this virtual table, who know an awful lot about this, but I think the role of the schools is paramount, because it's simple, really, folks. 99% of children go to school in the county. They pass through our 2 high schools. Yes, there are a tiny number of homeschooled people, but that is a very small number. I think children do well in schools. They also do well if they have a good family in the broadest sense of that word. And I feel for the long term, the approach of involving the schools at a very direct level. I was speaking to one teacher who again said, we don't necessarily need really highly qualified mental health professionals, but we need people right now to be able to help very promptly, so there are not long delays in them young folk getting help when they need it. That's, I think, perhaps the most important point. The schools act as a safety net. Most children do very well. The performance of our 2 high schools is excellent. I know more about Thurso than Wick, but the work that has been done within Thurso High School in the last year or 2 is, and I'll say it quite bluntly, it's outstanding, and it's been a team effort by lots of people. So I think that's where our main hope lies. And as far as the police are concerned, just to slip back 6 years in my life to when I wore the dice cap, I do, and it's not an anecdote, it's just a request, and it's not harking back to the good old days, but in the time when there was actually a small, we called it a proactive team based in the county of a sergeant and 3 or 4 constables who were immediately able to be deployed each morning at the daily briefing meeting to where there was a particular problem. And it might not be criminal at all. It might be going into the schools to speak to children about speeding or taking care, stranger danger, all this sort of stuff. I just feel we have one hard-pressed inspector in the county where there used to be 3 senior officers, to have a resource that he can deploy immediately, quickly, in the appropriate manner. And a lot of it is not crime. Some of it is. I think that might be a really helpful prop, not just for Police Scotland, but also for other agencies. As we've all been saying, this is a partnership thing. The police have their part to play, so do the other agencies. But in terms of actually helping the police, I know, Conrad, it's a bit unfair just landing you with this in a way, but I feel that's something, I don't know how long you could do it for, but it would be something that would be a great help to the county in the broadest sense of the word. Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to go on. That's my thoughts. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Matthew. Before I bring in Deirdre and Donny, I just noticed that Joan Laurie has joined us, and so has Andrew Jarvie, possibly a few others that I've not noticed. So I realised I was a little bit rude because I started this meeting without letting anyone introduce themselves. For the benefit of anyone who's just joined us, we have adjourned the formal Caithness Area Committee Council part of the meeting and moved to an open public discussion. So it is more informal and everyone is able to contribute, and I hope you all feel free to contribute as much as you like. It's really important all your views are heard, but bear in mind that the meeting is recorded and minuted. I think I will go to Deirdre, Donny, and I notice Conrad's hands up now too, but then I'm just going to add a little bit of structure by turning to the specific recommendations and the 5 key work streams so we can get out some specific thoughts around that. I'll come to Deirdre first, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you very much for inviting me here today and inviting me to speak. I am so pleased. Nicola, I'd like to speak just a little bit about culture. I was a councillor in Wick between 1999 and 2003. I represented Wick West, and my passion at that time, and what continues to this day, is inequality, poverty, particularly child poverty and well-being. And I've been actively involved with the Women's Aid and the setting up of the refuge in Wick. And just before the end of my term, I was chair of the Family Centre project in Lower Pulteney, which was designed specifically to address the issues of child poverty. So it was very, very dear to my heart. I was away from Wick then for 4 years and returned in my capacity as the area leader for Caithness and Sutherland, and was really keen to get my teeth back into the poverty agenda, and we had a number of reports to the area committee. But in attempting to get the ball rolling, I came up against the process which was in place at that time with the district partnership, which was to submit a formal application for an issue to be considered to be placed on the agenda, which I did, child poverty. After doing that, I was invited 3 months later to come and talk to my formal application, and that was taken away to be considered for yet another 3 months gap. So an issue as important as poverty and inequalities, there was a scale of 9 months, and quite frankly, it petered out, and I was quite disheartened. As we know here today, it takes a village to raise a child. It's not the province of any one service or individual. It's the collective responsibility of all of us. And it's just music to my ears to hear that sentiment echoed around the table today. Our Chief Executive, Donna Manson, mentioned very early on about special ingredients. And it's just tremendous to see today the leadership, the commitment, the energy to work together. And it's not talk together, it's actively work together in collaboration and as equal partners with a common aim. And I really want to commend what you've done, the work you've done to date, and the position you've got yourself into, very much with a solution-focused and action-based approach. And I don't doubt with this energy and leadership and enthusiasm, you're going to make great inroads. So the comparison with the culture of a few years ago compared with the dynamic approach that has emerged over the recent months is so impressive. And again, I'd like to thank you for inviting me here today, and I'm happy to help in any way I possibly can. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Deirdre. It was really good to hear, and it's great to have you here today. Moving on to Donny, please.
Thanks, Chair. There's hardly anything for me to say. I think everybody said most of it, but I would like to say to the comrade, if when people is on drugs, their next door neighbour doesn't want to tell the police or anybody, they don't want to be involved in the scene at all. What I would like to see, and it was touched in, a high school. Each high school, if an officer could go there, so as twice a year, and stress where the problems are, and maybe SB, the cure is from the high schools. And same with the fire brigade. They, was it 2 years ago, they had people from the high school showing them what the firemen do. And I thought it was one of the best things I've seen. And I would like to see that back. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Donny. Conrad has kindly agreed to address some of those points. I just want to mention that although there is a big role for Police Scotland, it's very much a partnership approach. And I think it's worth bearing in mind that what we're aiming towards is having enough early intervention and prevention work and health-based work too, and education work, that really the police would be the last resort, and we're hoping to be able to address some of these issues at their root. But of course, having a well-resourced police force locally is important to that as well. So I'll bring in Conrad now to address some of those points, please.
Yeah, just so that Matthew and I have had some early conversations about this, but we probably need to catch up again, I think, Matthew. But I did commit to Matthew when I came here that, you know, with fresh eyes of a new commander, then actually looking at the resource I have available to me, and how I deploy that across the whole of Highlands and Islands is something that it'd be right and proper for me to do. And I don't kind of take anything off the table in terms of having that that discussion and that review and that look. And the sort of suggestions that I've had off table from Councillor Rees and today are absolutely valid suggestions and maybe directions that we move in. I don't control all the resource that operates in the Highlands and Islands, and so some of this is about how we get better coordination, better access to some of those national or regional assets as well. Within the strategy, though, the police strategy that I spoke about, it does refer to an action on me to review the deployable resource across Highland. It also has actions around interaction with our road policing colleagues about how they deploy in the Caithness area, and some of our broader regional assets as well. So there's nothing off the table, but at the same time, I wouldn't want to promise some sort of flood of police officers into Caithness because we are stretched extremely thinly with ever increasing demands as an organisation, and I have to have to manage that and the number of demands that we face across the Highlands and Islands. But I am committed to reviewing it. I am committed to seeing if there's anything we can do to increase the policing footprint. And capacity generation is the sort of language that I've used, because it's probably not just as simple as increasing the resource on a day-to-day basis. It's about the clever use of resource as and when required. So my commitment to the committee is that I absolutely am doing that as part of this first 6 months in role. And I can report back at a future committee on how that is progressing. The other piece was around the sort of schools piece. Well, two bits that Councillor Mackay came back with. Probably one about the drugs intelligence. I understand the nervousness of people informing on their neighbours or informing on anyone else in society, and worried about repercussions and all the rest of it. We still need to actively encourage that. There are a number of ways that information can be passed to the police, and we are developing a partnership portal so that partners can report more easily intelligence into us. We have Crime Stoppers as an anonymous way to report in your own information that comes to us in terms of locations, and we do still go out there and ask the police, and that's a big part of Operation Ruling, that engagement to try and understand. Without people telling us, without that intelligence, we won't get warrantry to go and take action as we have done. So we do need to encourage that, whilst we recognise the challenge that is for some individuals. I mean, the school interaction, I mean, I think you said yourself, Chair, around there are probably agencies better placed to do some of that education and prevention at work, but the police will always have a part to play in that. And that is something that we can look at in partnership going forward in terms of our role in that, and supporting everything Derek said Fire and Rescue Service are doing, and how we can do that collaboratively as well. So it's absolutely, we are part of the jigsaw, and hopefully it's a much bigger jigsaw than it maybe used to be.
Thanks very much for that, Conrad. So we have until 12 o'clock, folks, and I'm conscious of the time. So I think what I'll do is, if you look at the recommendations Caithness members will be asked to make at 12 o'clock, the first two are to note the 5 key work streams that were identified through the workshops, and also to agree to the project action plan set out in the appendix, recognising that it's a draft project action plan and we'll be taking more detail around it in January. So could I invite contributions specifically about the work streams that have been identified and the action plan? And I have Ranald and Ian and Carl with their hands up. So I'll come to Ranald, and please, we didn't have time to do introductions at the start, but feel free to let us know where you're from, Ranald, for those of us who don't know.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nicola. First, I'd like to express my gratitude at the opportunity to be here, and for the members for suspending their standing orders in order to allow people like me to talk. I'm part of Caithness Drug and Alcohol Forum, and have for many years been very active in this particular field. And you know, I'd like to just very briefly, I'd like to read a small quotation from you. This is from a book. This is the story. It's a preface to the life story of a guy who was brought up in America. He was black. He was brought up in an evangelical family. Till the age of 19, he was actually an active evangelist. Then he discovered alcohol and drugs, and he ended up in the gutter, skid row, as a loser, as our current American president would describe such people. And then he got into recovery. And what he says that I think is key to this whole process is just a couple of short sentences. I had been preached at, analysed, cursed, and counted, but no one had ever said, I identify with what's going on in your life. It happened to me, and this is what I did about it. So I do note that one thing that slightly bothered me is the very last comment on the on your action sheet there refers to lived experience, and I think it should be very near the top. You know, we don't just need more of the same. What we require is new approaches, and they need to be ground up. They must be community based. We must use the resource that we have of these people with lived experience to do precisely what that man in recovery said. Say, I identify with you. I know what it's like to be in your shoes. We must encourage and train people with lived experience to actually deliver a 24/7 service to other people with the same difficulties. You know, we alcohol and drug addiction are mental health problems. There's no question of that. The problem about recovery is not stopping drinking or swallowing chemicals or injecting them or whatever. The problem is how to live in reality after you've stopped the drinking or the swallowing the pills. The problem is that the troubles that individuals have before they become addicted or before they become suicidal. My brother killed himself, and you know, he wasn't one of the kind of people who did much in the way of crying for help or anything like that. He just went and did it, and I had to spend a week, you know, combing hills and rivers and God only knows what, looking for him, and eventually, you know, but so people with lived experiences can actually directly talk honestly, one-to-one, on an equal footing with people who have any form of mental health difficulty or addiction. And you know, we must. It's lovely to hear of all the promises from statutory services. Great. You know, I'll finish with one small anecdote, which I've bored several of you with before. In 1967, at the age of 17, I founded an organisation. I was addicted to founding organisations. I was on 17 voluntary committees simultaneously as an office bearer at the peak of my active addiction to that. So I founded the Sociological Society of Aberdeen University, and we collectively decided that the thing to do was to hold a forum, a public forum, a big public forum on drugs, the effect of drugs in our community. So I turned up to chair this with my with my beads, my kaftan, and my Afghan coat and my sandals, of which I was all very, very proud. We had the local MP, we had the leader of the bishop of the Catholic Church, we had a Church of Scotland, the local deacon or whoever he was. We had a variety of folk, and we also had the newly appointed sergeant in charge of the new drug squad in Aberdeen City Police. And this very kind, dedicated man announced to the public at large that there was virtually no drug problem in Aberdeen. The bulk of the audience of several hundred fell about laughing because most of them were carrying drugs in their pockets. He said that furthermore, with this new facility, the drug problem would be stamped out in the city within 12 months, 18 months at the most. That was 1967. Now, you know, I now realise that I'm very grateful to our police representative here. I mean, he's talking turkey. He's telling the truth. Police are not social workers. They're not, you know, they're not counsellors. You know, this is not their job. We need to use the resources already in the community. They're free or virtually free. We can train people up who are motivated, because one of the greatest gifts that anybody can ever have who gets into any form of recovery, even if it's only for 24 hours, is the ability to help another person with the same problem. And that is so therapeutic. And so I'll shut up. I'll get off my soapbox. It's wonderful to be here, and thank you, Nicola and Carl in particular, who've worked tirelessly to raise this elephant in the room, you know, to the surface of our consciousness. And we can collectively, as a community, we have the power, we have the resources, and it's not going to take vast input from statutory services. It's going to take a changed approach and the use of the assets we've got, the community-based assets we already have, and most of it's voluntary and developing and growing, and not can be done quite cheaply. So on that note, I'll just say again, thank you so much. It is wonderful to be present at this is the stuff of my dreams for the last 20 years. I've been 20 years, it's in my 20th year in recovery, and you know, prior to that I was a headmaster working for Highland Council for 30 years. So this is an equal opportunities problem. Mental health issues and addiction issues afflict everybody. You know, no matter how high, low, great or mighty you may be, you know, this can happen to any one of us. So let's all work together on the solution. Thanks very much indeed, Nicola.
Thank you very much, Ranald. That was really personal and courageous and open and direct, as it always is from you, and we really appreciate that. And I'll make a note that we need to make sure that we capture the lived experiences, and it's led by people with lived experiences, and we'll take that into the session that will follow. Ian, you had your hand up earlier and you've taken it down. Would you like to come in?
Yeah, just very briefly. I mean, most people have covered this off. Sorry, I'm chair of the Caithness Community Planning Partnership, and we've been delighted to be part of this conversation over the last, well, certainly over the last year in detail, but over the last couple of years, really. So we know the issues. I think it's really good to see that strategy and those action points coming out of the strategy. I think just picking up on Ranald's point, the bit about people who are in crisis is really important. I think the whole system approach is particularly important, and it's not going to be easy, which is why we're all here. But we all recognise the issues, and the other thing I would probably draw attention to and give plaudits to is the work that the Aspiring Communities team have been doing, both last year and again this year in a second phase of work. So that on the ground listening and empathetic approach is what's going on now. So we do have a lot to bring to this. So the likes of Alan and Julie and others who are on the call, we're here doing it, which is great. That's a really good start. Thanks, Nicola.
Yeah, thanks very much for that, Ian. Carl?
Thank you, Nicola. I'll maybe try and satisfy both your requests. So I'll begin by saying, you know, as members, we've been asked to vote and agree 5 points, you know, and recommendations, and I'm absolutely delighted to do so, and I wholeheartedly support these. The context and the intent of each of these 5 points is fantastic. Just a wee bit of time, I think it's only right that we acknowledge the work and contribution, and the commitment from everyone involved to reach the point that we're at today. I reminded myself of gently challenging Donna Manson about the timescales, excuse me, and to paraphrase, she said, look, relax, we've got this covered. You know, I think it's fantastic that we've reached this stage in such a short time. It was necessary, and I'm glad that we took that decision. So I think it's also important, one of the, in reading the papers for this, something that caught my eye was on page 5, and it said letters issued by Scottish Government to all 32 local authorities inviting application for this funding. And I thought about, you know, the level of information that's being fed to local authorities is just staggering. So someone's picked this up, and I'm glad that we've reached this stage, you know. So I missed that opportunity. And all too often, I think in the past in Caithness, we've maybe been lamenting missed opportunities, but, you know, there's no way we are ahead of the game in terms of being ready to tackle very difficult circumstances. So, you know, I think everyone needs to be congratulated for that. So, one of the other things in referring to the papers, Nicola, took my eye again, was the table 1, where it highlighted a range of work that's going on in Caithness. And I think the important thing is how we populate that table and then reflect in 12 months' time. That's going to be the marker in our success. So really important, and I think we've got all the ingredients to do that. So I look forward to that. I really think it's important to note the recent and the subsequent actions from Police Scotland with Operation Ruling. You know, during the stakeholder events, we talked about giving communities confidence, and, you know, I don't think there's any doubt that's an important part. So, and, you know, so many contributions today from Derek, I'm sorry I've forgotten your last name, but Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, absolutely incredible. So, as I say, all the ingredients are there. Just a gentle challenge to ourselves as members, Caithness members, thinking about jobs. You know, I'm conscious that many of us are involved in Caithness North Southern Regeneration Partnership. I think we've got to challenge ourselves and really explore opportunities and create them as quickly as possible. Thinking about Ranald's contribution, which is always fantastic, and on Mark, I think he's absolutely right. I was thinking, Ranald, and if you look at the papers in emerging work streams, point to, and I'll quote it verbatim, it says, creating safe spaces for young people to gather, such as spaces that are warm, connected, and cool in the inverted commas, and provide access to safe people, including peer-to-peer support. And my memory of the breakout group, Ronald, was exactly referring to the point you make, as people with lived-in experience. So take a bit of confidence that we understand that, and it will be implemented. The final thing, I may be wrong, I never saw social prescribing being mentioned in the document, and it's so important for me. And again, it's something that Ronald touched on, is a strength in our community. There are so many people who want to contribute to, you know, doing, excuse me, what we need to do. So I'm sure we've got an eye on that, but I look forward to us, you know, creating the right circumstances and delivering the right outcomes. So thank you.
Thanks, Carl. It also occurred to me quite recently that social prescribing wasn't on it, so that's definitely, I think, something we need to have a look at. Matthew, I have a few hands up, so if I could ask you please to be brief so we can get maximum contributions from everyone.
Absolutely, especially if you ask so politely. I will be very brief. Quickly, Councillor Donny Mackay mentioned the thing that the fire service were doing. Donny, I think it was called High Fires. I was at that presentation as well. It was excellent. And for those around the table who don't know, basically it was about a dozen young people were selected by, well, from Thurso High School, I think selected by the staff. These were young people who were kind of on the edge of things that might be a bit worrying. They went on about a dozen sessions with the local fire service. It was absolutely excellent, as Donny said. The key problem, though, was at the end of it, I asked one or two friends in the fire service, you know, why can't we do this more, just as Donny was articulating? And the answer is, folks, it's simply down to money. It wasn't a lot of money, but they need to pay the firefighters a bit for their time. There's some of the equipment that needs to be bought. But it was just a very small practical example of the schools picking up on people who might benefit from a short course. But the key thing that drove that was the fact that a bit of money was required. So now we have some money. So I suppose on behalf of the Fire and Rescue Service, I'm just saying that might be a good point. The second point, Chair, very quickly, is page 27. There's a quote from Dr. Brooks about adult psychiatric assistance, that it's so difficult to get it. And I know there's a huge recruitment problem across the UK for this. But it just seems to me Dr. Brooks is someone who is absolutely on the front line. She's the police surgeon as well as a GP in the town. If she's picking out that is one big ticket problem. I don't know that we can solve it, but I think it's a very, very significant comment that she's recorded there. I don't have the answer, but it's a mighty challenge. And if we could sort that one, it would be fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, happy to consider that, Matthew. And I do think that it's important that we have the professional services for crisis as well as the community-led approach. Yeah. If I could come now to Julie Marker, please.
Hi there.
Hi, Julie.
Hi there. Just like to say thank you for inviting me to be a part of this conversation today. I think it's really important. I could talk all day about mental health and the issues that we've all been experiencing in the last few months, but not just the last few months. Of course, we know this has been building up over a number of years, as some of the participants today have mentioned. I'd just like to say that I think the work streams that have been summarised are excellent. I think it's a wonderful way of the work that has gone into it in such a short space of time. It just shows what can be achieved when everyone pulls their resources. I think it's a really exciting time for us, and I think a great way of ending the year after all of the problems that we've experienced in the communities. I think it's just a really exciting time to go forward. Just one thing I would like to mention about peer support. I think it's essential that everybody's involved, and we keep saying this over and over again. The peer support aspect of things, that there's so many wonderful contributions that people can make, and I think now is the time that we are listening more and more. We are hearing. What I would like to challenge very slightly is the assumption that people that are professionals don't have lived experience. It seems it can sometimes come across that it's either those that have lived experience or professionals, whereas I would like to suggest that, especially in recent times, people have expressed, been more open about their own experiences. Many people here today will have experiences of trauma, adverse childhood experience, making a difference in their roles, whether that's the police, NHS, community sector, councillors, and I think it all just adds to the rich tapestry of all the things that we're all doing together. I think it's excellent and exciting. So well done to everybody, particularly Nicola and Carl. I think you've just done a huge amount of work behind the scenes. It's incredible. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Julie. And that is a really important point. And I've been at quite a few meetings recently where people who I would consider to be professionals or counsellors or officers have shared really personal experiences. So you're absolutely right to make it. I'll now go to Willie, please. Willie Mackay.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you. Yeah, a lot of things said here today. Absolutely wonderful. We've gone through them already. Looking at the recommendations there, as you said, the strategic lead is so important. This is paramount in taking this forward. Earlier, Councillor Rees, my colleague, said that this has been going on for years. Well, 50 years ago in 1970, when I came to Caithness first, working with the farming community, I came across my first suicide. I couldn't believe it. No warnings, model farm, doing well, took his own life. 50 years ago. And here we are today facing enormous circumstances. The strategic lead is so important here, Chair, because it's a whole system approach. This is the key, as we know, going forward. So I endorse that absolutely. I have a great deal of confidence in the community coming forward, absolutely. Having worked with them and still working with them for the past 50 years. But noting something we haven't mentioned already so far, Chair, and that's social media. I'm a big user of social media, socially, absolutely. But if we took the bad element out of social media, out of Caithness, this challenge would be much more easier for us all. So yeah, I particularly endorse the recommendations. Well done, and look forward to getting a strategic lead on this Pathfinder project. So well done, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Willie. We'll make a note of social media as well. Andrew Jarvie, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for extending the invite to today to myself as well. I think it's beyond brilliant to see this finally rolling out somewhere, and I think particularly with the needs and challenges that Caithness faces, not just now, but what we unfortunately know will come in the future, this is absolutely the right place to launch such a programme and hopefully be able to halt the trajectory, which is unfortunately repeated not just across Scotland but across the UK in areas which are suffering from depopulation, seeing less and less opportunities for people living there. There was one quite stark statistic, a number. Suicide and mental ill health rises in areas where there are fewer opportunities, in areas where there's a declining population, and there's a consistent benchmark across Scotland that has tracked true over the years, linked strongly to population density. And there was one study from 2007, and I recall that the figure was something for every reduction of the population density by a factor of 4, the suicide rate doubles, which is really quite significant when you compare the population density in different parts of the Highlands, and it paints a very unequal picture of what is the same part of the country. I think in terms of what's being proposed, it is a fantastic first step. Not just looking at the whole systems approach, because mental ill health in one family doesn't affect just the person, it affects that entire household. So what one adult suffering a hard time, that unfortunately does filter down to the children, and that affects their ability at school, that affects their ability to attain grades, to go on to training and to placements, and all too easily it snowballs, and you have a very, very vicious cycle that's hard to break out of. So both addressing the issues as they stand and also trying to put a cap to prevent anything snowballing further is absolutely essential. And I'm really looking forward to what this programme can achieve. I think one thing that has been good to hear is the levels of integration and partnership working that seems quite stark to me in Caithness compared to Inverness, because all too often it's an issue of that's not my problem, that's not for me to deal with, that's for somebody else to deal with. And particularly in mental health, people get past pillar to post, and it's eventually left with the police to deal with once a crisis is broke. I don't know what the figures are for up here, but certainly I was shocked in Inverness when we had a reduction at the police station, where we were told that in Inverness about a third of all calls involve mental health. And that's a significant chunk of police officers' time that's taken up dealing with something. And when we were told some of the cases that they dealt with, the overwhelming majority of them would not have gotten to that stage had something been put in place for that person sooner. And that would have prevented diversion from police resources in our communities. It would have prevented someone reaching a crisis point, and it would have also helped every person who's involved in that person's life. So I'm really looking forward to what this can do and what's actually going to come along the way. Because I think for far too long, something like mental health, which affects society indiscriminately as one very big broad brush, has been dealt with in silos for too often, and too many people left to crisis without a satisfactory resolution. So if this is the start, more than welcome to see it, and hopefully we can looking at using Caithness as a model for elsewhere.